Chapter 4. The Myth of I Could Have Chosen Differently. The freedom we want is often only the name we give to our desire to control. Tolstoy. A great deal of the suffering connected to choices is born from a seemingly harmless sentence. I could have chosen differently. It appears after a mistake, after a loss, after a decision that did not produce the expected result. Looking back, we imagine another path, another answer, another attitude. The sentence sounds so natural that it is rarely questioned. And yet it is precisely there that one of the greatest confusions about freedom lies. When someone says they could have chosen differently, they're almost never talking about the past as it truly was. They're looking at that moment with the consciousness of the present, using information that did not yet exist, emotions that only arose afterward, and a level of maturity produced by the very consequences of the choice. The past is judged with tools it did not possess. To make this clearer, imagine an extreme situation. Suppose there's a car capable of traveling through time. It returns to an exact instant in which a person is about to make an important choice. Not an approximate return, but exact. The same external conditions, the same environment, the same words in the air, the same internal state of the person. Nothing changed. Absolutely nothing. Now the car goes back a second time, and then a third, and then countless times, always to the same exact point, frozen in time, with everything rigorously identical. The question is simple. What would we expect to happen? If we believe the choice could be different on each return, then we must admit something strange, that the decision does not truly belong to the person, that it is not an expression of what the person is at that instant, but something loose, floating, capable of varying without prior foundation. In that case, the choice would not be part of the individual. And if it is not part of him, it makes no sense to hold him responsible for it. But that is not how we understand reality. That is not how we live. That is not how we judge. Intuitively and correctly, we expect that every time the car returned to that same instant, the choice would be exactly the same. Not because there were no apparent alternatives, not because of external coercion, but because the choice is a direct resultant of everything that person is at that moment. His history, his values, his fears, his beliefs, his emotional state, his capacity to understand the situation. To expect a different choice without changing anything is to expect a different effect without changing the cause. That is not freedom. It is incoherence. What usually happens is something else. Something changes after the choice. A consequence arises. A suffering appears. A learning imposes itself. The person transforms. And then, from that new state, the person looks back and thinks, today, I would do differently. And he probably would. But that today did not exist in that instant frozen in time. The mistake is to demand that the past act with the consciousness of the future. Arthur Schopenhauer captured this point precisely when he said that the human being is free to do what he wants, but not to want what he wants. The sentence disturbs because it dismantles the silent expectation that we could have wanted something else without anything in us being different. But that expectation was never real. The will arises as a result of what we are. The choice merely follows that movement. That is why regret, although deeply human, is often misread. It does not prove that we were free in an absolute sense. It proves that we changed. It proves that something in us is no longer the same. To regret does not mean that we could have chosen differently at that moment. It means we became someone who would choose differently afterward. This distinction completely changes the way we deal with guilt and judgment. When we ignore it, we carry an unjust weight, being charged for possibilities that never existed. We demand from ourselves and from others a lucidity that simply was not available. Here, discomfort fulfills its function. It tears the illusion that there is somewhere a magical point where we could have been radically different without anything in us being different. But that tear is not destruction. It is opening. When we understand that the choice would always be the same at that instant, something reorganizes. Responsibility does not disappear, it deepens. Because now the choice is truly ours. It is not an accident, nor a drawing of lots, nor an inexplicable whim. It is a faithful expression of what we are at that point in our trajectory. And that is precisely why learning makes sense. If the choice were random, there would be nothing to learn. But because it is coherent with who we are, its consequences teach us, shape us, and alter future conditions. The past could not have been different, but the future can, because we can transform. The myth of "I could have chosen differently" is comfortable because it preserves the fantasy of absolute control. But it is expensive. It produces excessive guilt, resentment, and an idea of justice built on the impossible. Abandoning this myth hurts at first. But like everything this book proposes, that discomfort is only the crossing. On the other side, something more human and more beautiful emerges. The understanding that each choice was exactly what it could be at that instant, and that this is precisely why growing, learning, and evolving are not only possible, but inevitable. For now, it is enough to keep this simple image. If we returned infinitely many times to the same instant, the choice would always be the same, because that choice is us at that moment. Everything that comes next deepens this understanding.